Hi, everyone. I'm Mad Hildebrandt, and this is the Get Mad Show. Today, our guest is Arturo Terrazas, who is running for state senate in New Mexico in District 31. Let's go. Welcome to the show, Art. We're really glad to have you here, and we'd like to start right off by having you tell just a little bit about yourself that makes you human.
So thanks for having me on today, Matt. I appreciate it. Really joy to talk to you. About myself, I was born in Doña Ana County, raised in Anthony, New Mexico. Went to school at Gadsden High School, class of '98, and then I went on to study politics at New Mexico State University. Since then, I worked in several different campaigns and nonprofits. Worked for John Kerry's presidential campaign, which was very fun, but also heartbreaking, of course, at the end. And stepped back from politics for a little while. In 2008, though, I decided to get back in. Was asked to come work for then candidate Harry Teague's congressional race, and when we won that seat back, which was just a wonderful year for us in 2008, the congressman asked me to come on his staff to work in DC, and so I moved to DC, came back to help with the reelect, and then stayed in DC for a while, working for the American Counseling Association, which is a professional association that represents counselors who are mental health counselors, school counselors, career counselors, and worked on issues for folks in creating equity for mental health care access. Now I've moved back working on issues having to do with promoting solar energy and policy in the state of New Mexico. And now I live in Sunland Park, just a few miles down the road from where I grew up. And I don't have a wife or kids, and I'm still trying to look to get a dog, but the campaign schedule is not as forgiving for our furry friends. So I want to make sure I've got some time to dedicate to a dog when I'm able to.
Yeah. That's it's fun to have them, but boy, do they take up space.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that it's awesome that you worked for John Kerry. I did as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, wonderful.
When I was in Northern California,
Oh, great.
I ran several counties up there for him, and again, it was great. But yeah, and then I was his delegate. I was his
Oh,
delegate. So
wonderful.
that was.
You went to Boston, yeah.
So it's really awesome to when we do see somebody who supported that same candidate that
Yeah. No, I had a lot of respect for him. Very
yeah,
great
and
experience though.
yes, and now he's getting active along with Al Gore, or us in his own organization, but in the environment field for climate change, and I think that's really important. So but what I want to ask you first, what I want to talk about first, and we will get to the environment soon,
Sure.
but the thing that's topmost in everybody's mind right now, because it's what's keeping so many people at home and off work and worried about health and so much, is COVID-19. And I know that it is affecting your district as it is everywhere else. But so can you give me just talk about that for a few minutes, or for a minute, just to let your constituency there know where you stand.
Sure. And thanks for asking about that. It's going to affect, and it has affected, Southern Doña Ana County, which is what the majority of what Senate District 31 comprises of, particularly hard. There was actually a story in the Las Cruces Sun News today that documented the fact that out of the 159 cases that Doña Ana County is known documented to have, 75 of those at least are in our district. So it's hitting District 31 particularly hard. Anthony, the town I grew up, has 24 cases. Sunland Park, the community I currently live in, 16 cases. Chaparral, which is on the east end of the district, is 27. And there's another 8 in Santa Teresa, which is a neighboring community. So our people are getting particularly harder hit. And, the statistics tell us a lot about why that is. But one of the biggest reasons I think that I know that is because these communities are all designated federally as colonias. So they're poor communities. They lack infrastructure. They lack access to healthcare. And a lot of these folks don't have access or don't have jobs where they can telecommute. That's why I'm the only candidate in the race to actually have proposed a recovery plan for COVID-19 for the economy to take care of these constituents so that we can get back on our feet when this is over.
Yeah. And it is just heartbreaking each time we look at certain areas where that are hot spots in that fashion. And we do tend to see that in in poorer communities. And there is that sense of injustice that we see going on, and including in the recovery plans and efforts that we see across the country just still seem to leave that out. Um, Another thing that
There's a huge disparity.
oh yeah, yeah. Another thing that is so important, or one thing I should say that's very important during this time, and it's important all the time, is healthcare. And again, I know that there is a disparity there as well. And again, healthcare is on the top of everybody's minds right now. So could you talk about that?
Sure. For the residents in our district, we have an uphill fight. Just it seems when it comes to everything, and healthcare, there's not a shortage on the list. We have a lot of folks that are participating in the Affordable Care Act's exchange programs. A lot of people that are on Medicare, Medicaid. But what that means is all too often they have to travel 4 hours north to Albuquerque to see a specialist. My mother's one of them. My father, who passed away in 2016, really needed to see specialists having to do with cardiac care. And unfortunately, he just did not have access to that. And there's still too many people that don't go to the doctor because they can't afford it. There's too many people that don't get the medications that they need because they can't afford it. And we really need somebody to take an active role into creating, some sort of cooperative with hospitals across the state line in Texas to make sure that we can really have a complementary partnership together where people can get the access to that healthcare that they need, and they don't have to break the bank seeking it. I think that this pandemic has shown that healthcare is an absolute human right and needs to be recognized as such in this country, and we need to implement policies that are going to get us towards that area.
Oh yeah, yeah. And when I think about your district, because I spent a lot of time down there, and it's you border Texas, and there are if some sort of cooperation that could happen, that I know you're talking about, between the states, that could make sure that these people can in New Mexico are getting services even if they're in Texas. That and that kind of thing comes from cooperation. And I know that your cooperation between states is paramount to you. And I'm sure that your constituency will really appreciate that. I know another thing that's incredibly important to you, and because we're talking about you being in the hottest one of the hottest parts of our state, is you're right down there in the south, is the environment. And there's so many ways that, as we're looking at climate change, that New Mexico can approach this in a healthy way for the environment. And why don't you take a minute and talk about your thoughts about our environment?
Sure. So the environment, global, the climate change is happening, and we need to recognize that we need to take real bold steps to making sure that we're combating it. New Mexico passed the Energy Transition Act, and I applaud the governor for making sure that happened, but that doesn't mean that the job is done. And it affects our district in two different ways. Number one, it affects the farmers in our district, because when you have that kind of climate change, it's very hard to plan for your crops, and the yield that you're going to get is going to be substantially different. Secondly, obviously, it's the health and welfare of the people that are living down here. I think, one of the things I was proud to do in the 2019 legislative session is work with Patricia Roybal Caballero on pushing and promoting a community solar program so that people in my district could have access to solar power. This is a bill that was designed for people who rent, for people who can't afford, or for people who live in a structure like the one I grew up in, which was a double wide mobile home where you just can't put panels onto the house. And a community solar bill like that will allow people to take advantage of solar power. And that's the type of legislation we need to be implementing, not just for the welfare of the earth, but for the welfare of the communities.
Right. Yeah, 'cause that's one of those things that people don't really talk about is that, again, it comes to a social justice issue, is that there are things that are almost unreachable for people who are on the lower end of our economic scale. And if you live in a trailer, and just like you said, where are you going to put that solar panel? And that makes so much sense. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because very
Mm-hmm.
few people really have gone down to that level of
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the individual person. And I know, again, something that you're really interested in down there in addressing is your infrastructure. And all of these things are so combined, interlocked. So if you could talk about the infrastructure for your district, and that you want to bring to the state senate.
Sure. Infrastructure or lack thereof, unfortunately, for a lot of our communities. Um, for the entirety of my life, the communities that I hope to represent in the state senate have been designated as colonias by the federal government. What does that mean? That means that they lack adequate housing, adequate roads, adequate water and sewer systems by our own standards. And these problems didn't occur overnight, but the fact that throughout my career in public service and throughout the last 2 decades, no one has done anything and created a whole scale plan to get these communities lifted out of colonia status so that people have those adequate needs met is something that I want to start fixing. I want to develop alongside with the governor and our federal delegation a plan for every colonia, not just the ones in Senate District 31, but across the border, to make sure that we've got a plan to get from A to B to C so that we get them out of this colonia's designation so that people will have the basic needs of life met. I've seen all too often the fact that money gets directed outside of the district, and people make those decisions. We need to make sure that that money is invested wisely within our communities so people can be safe and have adequate living conditions.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, that is just so important. And and that is the one thing that everybody needs to think about, is that in all areas of the state, we are interlocked. And when we have one area that has issues that are not being addressed, it's all of us who are
Mm-hmm.
having that issue. And or are we may not be personally experiencing it, but it's affecting the whole state. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important to make sure that we focus in on some of those areas, like
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about. And one of those things I know that you want to talk about here quickly, is jobs and
Mm-hmm.
job development, and that could really help in your district. So if you can talk about jobs.
Sure. So jobs again is something that it does interlock with a lot of things. It certainly interlocks with healthcare, because if we have good, high-paying jobs that provide healthcare for the employees, it's going to raise the level of healthcare here. We're just not doing enough in our Senate district to leverage the benefits or the possibilities that we have. We're a Senate district that has at least 3 museums within it. The Organ Mountains Desert Peak is actually within the district. We have the 4th busiest trading port for meat within the country in the district. It also has its own airport. And of course, it borders 2 vibrant cities, Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, Texas. I want to do more cooperation between those 2 cities when it comes to trade, when it comes to having a larger wholesale economic plan to make sure that people are working. And even if it means in my district, people go to El Paso to commute and come back, they're going to bring those dollars back to southern New Mexico and to our Senate district for our communities. So we have to really start leveraging those benefits as far as it goes from tourism to agriculture products, and also again to trade. And we just really need to focus and again just develop a plan that's going to work and increase our chances of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is by bringing in more access to jobs out of state, by bringing in more jobs in state. The things that you're looking at, I think, are um, are necessary for your district, and that's pretty exciting to look at some of that and see the possibility for change. Um, we are now at the very end. So what I would like you to do is take another minute and actually address directly to your constituents and tell them why they should be voting for you.
Well, from my standpoint, what I would like my constituents, hopeful constituents, to know is that I'm somebody who has lived through the problems that we all face in Senate District 31. And when you live through those problems, that's what drives you to find solutions. I know what it's like when the heavy rainstorm comes and you get stuck in the mud that's out here in southern New Mexico trying to get, your car out of your driveway and on the road so that you're not late for work. We've experienced those things together, and it's somebody who has also been trained and gone to other parts of the country and know that the standards of living in other parts of the country are much higher, and we need to have those here. We need somebody who's going to be active, who's going to be present in the community, who understands that you legislate with people, not at them, and who also thinks through policies and legislation to know how they're going to affect people at the local community level, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. It's great to have ideas, but if those ideas can't be implemented in an effective manner, then they're not going to do us any good. And we need somebody who knows us, who's homegrown, can be a champion and a tireless advocate for our community. That's who I'm going to be as a state senator.
And it sounds like, your advocacy, you've been one, and you will continue that there. And that's I think, attractive for for the constituency there, for the actual population. And that you haven't lost sight of that. And that's a good thing for your district. And I really would like to thank you for being here today and for speaking with us and with all the viewers out there. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a fun experience, and I'm very appreciative of it.
And thank all of you out there for viewing today and for spending some time listening to this interview with Art. And I would like to ask you now to make sure that you pay attention to your candidates, go out and check their websites, and you will see Arturo Terrazas' website below, so you will be able to have access to that. I would also like you to quick link, select the subscribe button below so that you don't miss any of these interviews, because it's very important to see the makeup of the potential makeup of our state senate, and just make sure that you go out and vote. Make sure that you learn as much as you can about these candidates and then vote. And please vote in the primary and then also again in the general election coming up. And thank you everybody for being here, and we'll see you next time.